I think it's safe to say at this point that the M2 MacBook Pro could be one of the worst Apple releases in years. What's going on, YouTube? Unless you've been living under a tech rock, you've seen mountains of videos comparing the M2's performance in the MacBook Pro, which is supposed to have better performance because of its active cooling fan, so it's not just relying on the chassis of the device to dissipate heat. But with multiple teardowns showing slower SSDs and throttled CPU performance, we can only help but throw into question, are we going to see the same thing with the MacBook Air? And what does this mean for the M2 chip generation as a whole? That's what I'm going to be breaking down and explaining in this video. So guys, hit the subscribe button, click the bell so you don't miss as we cover all things tech, iPad Pro, Apple Talk, and Pro Audio. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granted Geek Show. Quick heads up, if you like the music in this video, check the link down below to Uppbeat, my favorite subscription service for music for your YouTube videos. I've used them in every video that I've made since I found them. Fantastic, check it out. So this is where we have to start. We have to distinguish between the M2 chip and the MacBook Pro. And what I mean by this is we're gonna see the M2 chip in multiple devices with multiple capabilities throughout the year. But the M2 MacBook Pro has some weird quirks that make us unable to help but wonder if we're gonna see more of this with the Air, the Mini, the iMac, and even the iPad Pro. Now, the MacBook Pro and Air were both announced at WWDC, but as of the recording of this video, the Air is still unavailable for purchase. So the M2 MacBook Pro is the first time that people are getting their hands on M2 silicon, right? Multiple teardowns are showing that the performance is severely throttled. And here's the scary thing, is in the last generation, the M1 Pro was more powerful than the M1 Air. And this was again due to the cooling system. The MacBook Pro was able to churn out better performance from the same chip. So are we to assume that the M2 MacBook Pro is more powerful than the M2 MacBook Air? I mean, if they have to throttle this M2 chip that has a fan, how much more will they have to do that when they have an Air with more pixels to push, a higher resolution camera, a different chassis? Okay, so this is all new engineering that they're working with in all these programs, all these things that are going to push this chip, and it's already showing it's pretty weak and in some places worse than the M1. And here's the problem, all this bad press and disappointment from fans, it's not going to change anything with the MacBook Air. That thing is already made. That's already in boxes. It's already ready to go. There's nothing they can do about that. There's no software update that they could push that would really help this. If the SSDs are just half as slow, they can't turn on fans because the Air has no fans. And the only thing they could do is allow the machine to run at higher temperatures, which of course is going to decrease the actual life of the chip, and thus your computer. Now, I didn't pick up an M2 MacBook Pro because I wanted to test out fresh the M2 chip on the new design MacBook Air, but seeing the performance in the M2 MacBook Pro, I doubt I'm even going to pick up the Air. I'll be waiting to see the M2 in the iPad Pro when and if that actually shows up, or of course in an M2 Mac Mini, as I love myself a good Mac Mini. Now, it's not time to jump ship on M2 just yet. There are some things that can help this. Unfortunately, the M2 MacBook Pro is kind of screwed with those SSDs. It's not going to get much better. They can kick on the fans a little bit earlier and pump some better performance out of it. Maybe that'll come in a software update. So there's hope there. But of course, the big thing is going to be chassis. That's what's going to save the M2. Obviously, in the Mac Mini, the iMac, and hopefully the Mac Pro and the next generation of MacBook Pros, there's going to be more space to dissipate heat. They can kick on fans better, and they won't have those half as fast SSDs, which make no sense to me. So that's when we're really going to see the 18% increase in CPU performance, 35% increase in graphics performance. So guys, there's hope for those devices, but the M2 MacBook Air and the M2 iPad Pro look to be screwed. If they're coming with those same slow SSDs and have no way to dissipate heat other than their own chassis, these devices are going to be a huge disappointment for customers. Now, of course, the new aesthetic and design of the Air is going to be something that makes them fly off the shelves. Maybe if they redesign the iPad Pro, which it's long overdue for now at this point, even though the design is still a classic and still looks good today, it's about that time. Those things are going to help the devices sell. but in terms of real pros trying to get work done, they're probably not getting an Air anyway. They might be on the iPad Pro like me if they're really trying to pioneer, but they're going to have to look elsewhere, because I don't think M2 is going to be the answer in those two devices. So guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below. This is super disappointing stuff, and it's the reason why I think the M2 MacBook Pro is one of the worst releases that Apple has made in a long time. So hit the subscribe button and click the bell. As always, I'm going to be talking more Apple talk, tech, pro audio, and iPad Pro news, of course, as this is very scary for iPad Pro users. But we got Stage Manager, we've got iPad OS 16. Hopefully it's going to make a lot of things better. I've still been testing beta versions of iPad OS 16. Stage Manager still does not want to work. It doesn't matter what display I hook it up to. It's not really a smooth experience, but it's getting better. It's just a beta. So stay tuned, guys, as we cover all of these things. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granite Geek Show.